everyone, it's Bethany. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I am going to be doing some applique shirts for my girls for back to school, and I thought I would take you along with me. So for the first shirt, I think I'm going to make about 5, but for the first shirt, I'm going to really slow down and do everything step by step and explain every little detail of what I'm doing. That way, if you're brand new to this, then you know exactly how to do this yourself. Now, when it comes to machine embroidery and applique, one thing I learned while I was learning this whole new hobby is that there are so many different ways that you can approach machine embroidery. So I say that because there's so many different types of stabilizers you can use. There's so many different methods you can do. So if you do it differently, please continue to do it the way that you love to do best. I'm just going to share what I have found works best for me and how I like to do it. But of course, just like with any hobby, there are so many different ways to approach it. So go ahead and do it the best that you like to do it, and I'll just share what I like to do. So I have 5 fun shirts that I'm going to stitch out today. I am really excited. My husband made me a fun smoothie, so I'm just going to be down here sewing and stitching out all of these fun little things, and I thought I would take you along with me. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, one more thing before we get started. Be sure to check out the description box below the video because I'll be sure to link all of the things that I'm using. So I will be sure to link the stabilizers that I am using and any other things that you see in this video. So be sure to utilize that if you want to take a closer look at anything or if you need to purchase any of these materials yourself. Okay, let's go ahead and get started now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on this first shirt. It's going to be so cute. Now you might hear my kiddos playing from time to time. They are having a good old time today, and that's just life playing in the background. So I am going to go ahead and start with this first little shirt. I am making this for my daughter. So this is a file that I purchased, and I will link it down below. And I have the PES file already loaded onto my flash drive, and it's now on my embroidery machine. But I printed out my design from Embrilliance, and when you print out your design from Embrilliance, it prints it true to size. And I like to do it this way because I like to make sure that I visually like the size of my design for my shirt. I want to make sure everything's good. And I also do it because if you notice, when you see the design, there are little crosshairs in the middle right here. And that helps me line up my design on my machine, which you'll see me do in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim around, and I'm going to just cut off all the extra. Now on the back, because I print double-sided, it does print out the steps. So it'll print out what steps are going. So the first one is going to be the placement stitch, tack down stitch, placement stitch, tack down stitch, and so on and so forth. So you cannot, you can do this and print it out, you know, on each sheet if you want to follow along with the stitches. But I usually don't. I usually use the stitch simulator in Embrilliance to kind of see what's going to be happening next. And I can go into all of that in another video if you want to know more about Embrilliance, which is just the embroidery software. Okay, so here is the design that I'm going to be using. Now you can actually buy embroidery blanks, and I actually just got a shipment in of really, really nice shirts, but as I'm getting my feet wet with machine embroidery, I have been practicing on just some store-bought shirts, and to be honest, I've been really, really impressed with them. So I am excited to try the actual embroidery blanks that I have purchased, but so far with just store-bought shirts, these are Cat and Jack, so they're from Target, I've actually been really impressed. And when you are buying or working with something that is not an embroidery blank, it really just depends on what stabilizer you use. So you may just need to layer some more stabilizer if it's a thinner shirt. So I'll show you how I will stabilize in just a minute, but here's my design. Then I went ahead and I picked out some fabrics that I wanted to place on this design. So these are the fabrics that I chose, and because you have your design right in front of you, you can see how much fabric you're going to need. So I went ahead and just pre-cut my fabric. That way it didn't take too long in front of you all. So I pre-cut all of my fabric, and the next thing that I need to do is I need to get some heat and bond light on the back of my fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and do the heat and bond light really quickly. I'm going to set my shirt and my design to the side, and then we will get everything stabilized in just a minute. So what I have is I have my heat and bond light. I just buy it in a little packet. You can buy it in rolls and bolts, and you can also buy it in a craft store, or I think I got mine off of Amazon. Maybe I did buy it in a craft store, but I just bought it in the little pack, but I need to get some more fairly soon. So when working with heat and bond, you want to make sure that for applique you do heat and bond light. So you don't want to do heat and bond ultra, because that will be, it's just too much adhesive and it will gum up your needle on your machine. So make sure that if you are doing something with sewing and there's going to be a sewing aspect in your project, do heat and bond light. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some heat and bond light, and I am going to measure it out and cut it for the backs of my fabric. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that the heat and bond light that you cut is smaller than your fabric piece. So for example, I'm just going to, it's a little hard to see on camera. Let me turn it over. I am going to kind of place a piece, and I'm going to put this on the back, but I'm going to show you the front just so that you can see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that heat and bond light just a tad smaller than my actual fabric piece, just like, without cutting my fabric here. Okay, just like this. And you want to do that because you don't want the heat and bond light to get on your sewing or your pressing mat. So make sure you just cut it a tad smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all my little pieces that match up to my applique fabric. Let's see here. I have lots of little pieces. These are going to be the crayons. So let's see, I think this will fit just about right. Yep. Okay, so that one's good, just like so. Okay, and I will just snip this off and save this for another project. Okay, then I'm just going to continue cutting pieces for my fabric. Okay, so I have all of my little pieces cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron on my heat and bond light to the back of my fabric. So you'll locate, this is the front of the fabric, this is the back of the fabric. So I'm going to lay it down with the back side of my fabric up, and I'm just going to lay it on my pressing pad here. And then I'm going to locate the shiny side of my heat and bond light. The shiny part of that, that's the adhesive. So you want the adhesive to go down on the back side of the fabric. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my iron and I'm going to iron that down. It really doesn't take much. Just get that all ironed down. And then when I'm done doing that, I'm going to place it onto a cool surface. That way it cools down. And I wait for it to cool down before I peel off the paper backing. So there's a paper backing, which you can notice right here, and you'll see me pull it off in just a minute. I'm just going to iron on all those little pieces. And again, you notice that my heat and bond light is a little bit smaller than my fabric piece. That way my heat and bond light doesn't attach to my pressing board here. So that's really important. That way you just don't make a mess. Okay, here we go. This is going to be such a cute shirt. I actually have made this shirt before for my youngest, and now I'm making it for my oldest because my oldest saw it and really wanted one. Letting all my pieces cool down, and sometimes it's hard to tell with some of the fabrics which side is the front and the back. Okay, and that last little piece. So now these are all ready to go. So I like to do this in the beginning. That way I am not continuously bringing out my iron and the heat and bond. I like to do all of the heat and bond and the ironing all at once. That way when the machine gets going, I can just start stitching and have all my pieces ready. So now what I can do is I can take that liner off, that paper backing, and then you'll see that the fabric is shiny. So that is the adhesive. So that's the heat and bond light on this. So you'll see later that we will place this as an applique onto the shirt to create our applique, I mean, and that's how that's gonna work. So I'm just going to peel these off and set them to the side, and I'm just gonna leave them with the adhesive side up. That way if I have anything accidentally on my table, it doesn't like attract any crumbs or anything. Although I was down here the other night deep cleaning my craft room, so everything just smells so clean and fresh. I love that. And oh, you probably can hear my little guy fussing in the background. He's with Daddy right now, so I'm having just a little sewing time, and it's so refreshing sometimes. Okay, so we have all of our pieces ready to go. Now we're going to prep our shirt and get that all ready with some stabilizer. Okay, so I have my shirt here. I'm just going to place that nice and straight on my pressing board. And I like to just give it a really good iron before I get started. That way there are no wrinkles in. And I personally, so I do all of my, I don't have an Etsy shop or anything. So I just do all of my shirts for my kids or for gifts or stuff like that. So I actually do pre-wash my shirts. That's probably just personal preference, but in case you are wondering, I do actually pre-wash my material. Okay, but I don't pre-wash my fabric. I just pre-wash my shirts. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some pins and I'm going to take my design and I'm going to just place that where I think it should go on the shirt. Now for toddler shirts, this is a 5T, so this is a little girl shirt, but I like to go about an inch from that collar line. And I think that looks pretty good to me. You can get out a measuring tape if you would like. I'm pretty visual. I'll probably verify this with a measuring tape, but get as specific as you would like, but just get the design placed where you would like it on the shirt. Okay, so again, I had shown you those little crosshairs in the middle, so I'm just going to measure from the crosshairs to the side seam of the shirt to make sure I am good. And it's 6 inches on each side. So I am actually, that is one of my strengths, is the visual part. For some reason, I'm pretty visual about placement. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, double check that I like everything and how that looks. And I do. Okay, now I'm going to take, you have to see these little pins I bought. If you've been around my channel a while, this is not going to shock you at all. I found, hopefully you can see that, I found these little pins that are bows. I mean, come on, how cute are these? I'll link these down below in case you're like me and have to have these. They were like a few bucks, so add to cart for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a couple pins, and now I'm just going to pin my design to my shirt. And this is just the way that I like to do it. If I find it's easier to get the design all centered on the machine as well. So I have found that this method is really nice for me. Plus I really like the visual of being able to see the design, like a preview of it with this design on it before I stitch it out, just so I know that, you know, if I need to go back into Embrilliance and make this smaller or grab a smaller size or tweak it in any way, then I can do so. Okay, so that is pinned. I actually have some embroidery tape coming, and as much as I love how cute these pins are, sometimes it can be a stinker when using them for this part and then later when I use a water soluble topper. So I do have some embroidery tape coming, and I'll share that when it comes, but I think that I'll probably end up using that in the future a little bit. We'll see. I'm not sure how well it would stick to the shirt, but I would think it would. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my shirt and I'm going to place it inside out. And then I'm going to place it on the side where my design is. So let me get this all just so. Okay. Okay. And now I am going to take a layer of poly mesh stabilizer, and I am going to place that right over, see how you can see the design through the shirt or an outline of it? I'm going to place that over the design. And the reason I like to do that design also in there and have the printout is because then I know exactly where I need to place my stabilizer. So I'm going to place my stabilizer right there, and then I'm going to iron that on. Now that stabilizer has, just like Heat and Bond Light really, it has a shinier side and a non-shiny side, so you'll just locate that shiny side. I purchased mine in sheets. Again, I'll link it down below. But I purchased mine in sheets, and it makes it really easy just to grab and go and not have to cut them. But I believe you can probably purchase it in rolls as well. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to get some tearaway, and I am going to layer one layer of tearaway. Now you can put 2 layers of this on there if you find that your shirt is really thin. So for example, I did one of my first shirts on a Hobby Lobby shirt, and it turned out beautiful. In fact, I posted it on my Instagram. It's so cute, and it was really thin, but it was really easy to work with, because what I did was I did a layer of the poly mesh, and then I did a layer, 2 layers of this tearaway. So If you find that your shirt is too thin, then don't be afraid to add another layer of your stabilizer. I think I've done another shirt with just one layer of tearaway on the back for this cat and jack, and it worked really well. So I'll do that again today for this one. But again, this one is a fusible, so you can just iron this on as well. And I really find that I'm liking the fusible stabilizers because you can just iron them on, you know they're gonna stay put, and it kind of just makes everything so much easier. Okay, so I've got everything ironed. Probably can pull this up a little bit and iron the bottom down a little. Okay, there we go. And then once everything has been ironed on, again, I have 2 layers of stabilizer. I have my poly mesh stabilizer, which is a cutaway, and then the top is the tearaway, and I just did one of each. So now I'm just going to place my shirt right side out again, and then I have my stabilizer in there. So now we're ready to go, and I'm going to leave my design on there again because that will help me to place my hoop, and it'll also help me to center my design on my machine. Okay, so now I'm just going to grab my hoop and we will go ahead and get this hooped and ready to embroider. Okay, so I am actually going to be using my new Mighty hoop. I purchased the 8x9 Mighty hoop and I love it. It is worth every single penny. It just helps make hooping so much easier. I did my first few shirts, of course, with the hoops that came with my machine, and they're doable, they're fine. But when you have tried a Mighty hoop, you will never go back. They are amazing. They make everything just faster and quicker. Now you want to be careful, and it tells you when you buy these, you want to be careful. They're very strong. They have very strong magnets. So you want to be very careful around any type of computers and electronics. So it goes through all of that when you buy it, and it tells you in the little box when it comes. But my hoops are amazing. So I'm going to take this inner part of the hoop and I'm going to place it inside of my shirt. So I'm just going to open up the bottom. Let me bring this up a little bit. I'm sorry. Bring this up. Okay. I'm going to open up my shirt and I am going to slide my hoop right inside, just like that. Okay, whoops, I had that upside down. So I'm going to take the inner part of my hoop and place it inside the shirt. And then again, I'm going to just trace with my fingers. Get it in there. Okay, I'm going to trace with my fingers, make sure it's centered. I'm also making sure that the line of my hoop down here is parallel with the line of my design, just to make sure that my design is all centered. Now, when I don't know if I went over this, I may be repeating myself, but when you are using a hoop that doesn't come with your machine, you want to make sure you trace on the machine. That way you can verify that your machine needle is not going to hit the edges of the frame. Okay, so just placing that exactly where I want it inside the shirt. And then for this next part, you want to be really careful because it's called a Mighty hoop for a reason. They have very, very strong magnets and you don't want to pinch yourself. So when I'm happy with that, I'll grab the top of my hoop and then I'm just going to hover it over my shirt and it will hoop itself. Just like that. So now it has been hooped. Now I can tell it shifted just a little bit, and it might be my design that just shifted, so it might be okay. But if you find that you need to rehoop it, you just pull off the top. Again, very, very strong magnets. So just pull off the top, get everything resituated, and just for good measure, I am going to just make sure I did that just right. Okay, so I like that much better. That feels much better. Okay, so our shirt is hooped and now we can take it over to the machine, get it placed on the machine. We're going to get our design all centered and on the machine, and then we will trace out a design before we start stitching. Okay, so now that I'm over at the machine, I want to make sure that when I load my hoop that I am making sure that the inside of the shirt down here, if you can see that, there is an arm right here. So I want to place the inside or that arm through the neck of the shirt right here. So I'm just going to place that onto my machine just like this. Okay. There we go. And I am going to just make sure down here that the shirt is nice and loose. That way the back of the shirt doesn't get sewn to the front of the shirt. And ask me how I know that. I did it a couple times, but luckily it was fixable. So now I am just going to, I always just check underneath, make sure that's really nice and loose. And then I can go ahead and get this all turned on. And I'm going to go, and I don't know if you can see my screen super well, but I am going to go to my USB and I'm going to locate the design. So I'm going to find my design, and then I am going to set my design. So say set, and I am going to, I don't need to do any type of rotating. Everything, my design matches my design up here. It's in the same orientation, so I'm good to go. So I can click embroidery. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, there are little arrows over here, and I'm going to just use those to line up my design. So there is a tiny little, let me zoom in a little bit. So there is a tiny little laser right here. So what I want is I want that laser to line up with the middle of my design. So I'm just going to use the arrows on my machine to bring that over to the right, down, until I like exactly where that's placed. Okay. Now once you have it centered and you have your little laser exactly in the middle, you can take your design off of your shirt. So I'm just going to take that off and we're good to go with that. Okay, so that is all done. Looks great. And now what I want to do is I want to click the trace button on my machine so that it traces out my design. And what I'm doing while it traces out is I'm making sure that laser never comes near my hoop, because if the laser comes near the hoop, then the needle will be near the hoop and it could damage your needle. So I'm just going to watch that laser while it is tracing. So it's tracing. It looks good. And it's just doing that perimeter of the design, the outermost edges, and it all looks good. Never did that laser come near my design, or my hoop, I apologize. So I'm good to go. Okay, so now what I can do is I have just a random color in my machine right now. I think it's a lime green from what I was working on previously, but because we are just doing the placement stitch, I don't really care about what color thread I use for my placement stitch or my tack down stitch, because you're not going to see it. It'll be covered up with the satin stitch. So whatever thread is loaded right now, I'm just going to go ahead and use. So I'm going to say lock, start, and it's going to stitch out my placement stitch. Whoops, and I'm noticing that my thread came unthreaded there, so I just need to rethread my needle, and I'll do that really quick. Okay, so again, I can start that stitch over and it will do my placement stitch. Okay, so it is a little hard to see there, so I'll try to take this off and show you, but it's a little difficult to see because of the color I chose. But this is the placement stitch. Now what the placement stitch is it's literally what it sounds like. It is a stitch that shows you where to place your fabric for your applique. So it's just giving you a little outline. So I'm going to place my hoop back over it on the machine. Again, double check underneath that nothing has attached itself. And then I'm going to place my applique fabric over my placement stitch. So now I have my applique fabric, and I'm just going to place that right over my placement stitch. Now, if you have a fabric that has a pattern that needs to be really specific in direction, make sure that you take the time now to, place that really nicely and straight on your design, because now it's going to do the tack down stitch, which again is exactly how it sounds. It's going to attach your fabric to your shirt. Okay, so now I can go ahead and start, and now it's the tack down stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to take my little applique scissors and I am going to trim around my tack down stitch. So I am just going to remove all of the material, being careful not to cut neither my shirt nor my thread. Now, if you do end up snipping your thread and you are doing a design that has a satin stitch, you don't really need to stress about it because that satin stitch is going to mend it, and it will make sense once you see how thick the satin stitch is. And I got really close to the top here, but just enough fabric. But I'm just going to trim around, being very gentle and careful. But you want to get close enough so that your satin stitch covers your cut line. And I also like to keep a lint roller handy so that I can pick up all of the little loose threads that may come off during the trimming. Okay, so if you have done applique and machine embroidery, let me know what your first project was. My first project actually was a t-shirt for my daughter, and I actually have found t-shirts to be super beginner friendly, so let me know what you started on. And also let me know what you would like to see me do with the machine. I am going to do some trick-or-treat bags for my kiddos with my machine this year. I can't wait, and I think that'll be really fun, but let me know what else you want to see. Okay, so I have my little lint roller here. It's just nice to keep handy. It picks up really quick all of those little pieces of thread that can come off, and I'm just perfecting anything that I think may be a little too long, and just taking my time here. Okay, I think I am good. Okay, that all looks pretty good to me. Okay, so now I am going to make sure I have all my threads off. I can reload this onto my machine and it will do the next placement stitch. Okay, loading it on, and again checking underneath my shirt. I just swipe my hand under there to make sure nothing is attached, and I will do lock start and it will do the placement stitch for the next piece. And before I put that next applique piece onto my newest placement stitch, I forgot to iron down my Heat and Bond light on that first level. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that really quick for my yellow layer. And I just put a piece of parchment paper on the top to protect my thread. So that's good. Okay, now what I'm going to do, and you might as well just grab it right now. Let's see which color. I need the pink for this first one. So I'm just going to place the pink. Let's see if you can see it pretty well on this camera. There is a very faint, and in person you would see it very well. There is a little faint placement stitch right there. So I'm going to place my fabric right over that and then put it back on the machine, and it will do the tack down stitch so that it will sew it to the shirt. Okay, lock and start, and now it is doing the tack down stitch. And obviously be very careful when your machine is running where you put your hands. I was trying to flatten down some of the fabric, but be very, very careful. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so now I'm going to trim, and I will also iron down that piece as well. Okay, I love the trimming part. It's kind of like with the Cricut, I loved the weeding part of crafting. I'm not sure why. I just find it very therapeutic to do the trimming. And then you can really just start seeing all the shapes come together. So really it is kind of like the weeding. I can kind of directly compare it to that. Okay, so got this little bottom part. And the more you do the trimming, with the scissors, the more natural it comes. The first time you do it, it seems really intimidating because you're so scared you're going to cut something, but you, just like anything, the more you do it, the more you get into the motion and it becomes easier. So if you ever see any little threads like this, make sure you cut them, because once your satin stitch goes down, it will stitch over it, and then it can be a little bit more of a stinker to clean up. So clean up any loose threads as you see them. Again, ironing down. And then we are going to do our next stitch. So again, it's just a repetitive pattern at this point of the placement stitch, tack down stitch, placement stitch, tack down stitch. So we're going to do our next one. I'll grab the thread or the fabric that we're going to need and head back to the machine. Placing my fabric over that placement stitch, lock, start. Okay, trimming again. So one of the funnest things about applique is that once you buy the design, there are so many different ways to use it based on what type of fabric you use. So you can, if you wanted to make this more of, I would think this kind of looks more of a unisex shirt, but you could probably tell me differently at the end. But based on your fabric choices, I guess I have this a little bit more girly than boyish, but you could make this look any way you'd like. You could tailor it to your child or the child's favorite color. Once you see the little initial go down, of course I'm doing pink for my little girl because that's her favorite color, but you could, you know, do any fabric choice that you like. So that's one of the things I really like about being able to do applique, is that your imagination can just go crazy, because there are endless fabrics in the world, and it's just really fun to mix and match fabric and get really creative. Okay, so now we are going to do the next little crayon. And honestly, I'm not sure which I find more relaxing, actually doing the applique or watching applique. I love watching applique tutorials because it's so fun to just see something come to life from small strips of fabric. It's just awesome. And so I did a video as well on how I am organizing my fabric, because as you can see with applique, you don't need much fabric. So I am buying mine in quarter yards only, unless I find something that I know I will use over and over and over again. Then I might buy like a half a yard, but you really only need a tiny, tiny bit. So I'll link that tutorial that I did on how I'm storing my fabric, because it's making it easy to find all of my fabric choices really quick when I want to pair up my fabric for my design, and it's getting really fun. Okay, back to the machine. Okay, checking the bottom of my shirt. Honestly, when you make mistakes in the beginning, it's probably one of the best things that can happen to you, because then you are so aware of it going forward that you probably won't make that mistake again. So be thankful for your mistakes. On the same lines of making mistakes, there was one shirt that I did, and just about every other stitch I did, the thread kept breaking, and so it really taught me how to thread my machine really, really well. And my husband was down here as well, just keeping me company while I was just creating, and also because he was super curious on what this machine does, and it's super fun to watch, right? So he reminded me that even though in the moment I was kind of frustrated because it was making my project take longer than it should have, of course, because I kept stopping and remedying a situation, it made me learn really quickly how to thread my machine, and it made me really quickly learn how to locate and navigate any problem areas. So now when my thread breaks, I know exactly what to look for. And so I just want to mention that, because when you're learning, sometimes we get all caught up in our mistakes, but really they're the best thing that can happen because we learn so much more from them. And of course that doesn't help you in the moment because you're rightly so frustrated, but just know there is something coming from it. Okay. Getting that all ironed down. And then I think at this point I'm going to need to do a thread change. I think we're going to do a satin stitch next. So before we do that, I am going to, actually, I don't think I'm going to do a water soluble topper. I didn't on my last shirt and it turned out really, really nice, and I didn't really notice a huge difference. So I will show you water soluble topper on another tutorial. You absolutely can put a topper on the top of this, and what it is, it's just another type of stabilizer that you put over this, and it helps your stitches from sinking into your fabric. But I didn't notice any problems on my last shirt, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue on without that step. But it does not hurt, so if you want to do it, go for it. Okay, so I'm going to place my hoop back on my machine here, and then I am going to change out my thread color. So now all of my pieces so far are on there. I still need to do my initial later, but it's going to do the satin stitch for around the top of the crayon box. So I need to get the right yellow onto my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rethread my machine really quick with the right color. Okay, so the color I have is already up here, so I'm just going to snip and pull that down through. I'll do an entire different tutorial on how to thread your machine. There are also a ton of tutorials on YouTube on how to thread your machine that they do such a good job. So if you need help doing that, be sure to check out those tutorials. Okay, so I'm just pulling my original color and my new color through my machine here. And just like that. Then I'm going to get this rethreaded, just like so, and thread. Perfect. Okay, so now we're ready to do the satin stitch, so I can say lock start, and here we go. Okay, and now, because the next step is going to be the lines to the crayons, I am going to go ahead and place or rethread my machine one more time. So I need to grab some black thread and rethread, and then I will start the next stitch. Okay, and now I just need to rethread, and it's going to do the pink satin stitch for the first crayon. Okay, so now all that's left is our initial. So it's going to do our placement stitch and tack down stitch. Again, like I said before, because you don't see those, I don't care what color thread that is. So I am going to go ahead and just keep the yellow on there, and I'll do those two, or I'll do the placement stitch real quick and then place our fabric down. So because this is a gingham and it has actual directional patterns in it, I'm making sure to take my time to get that as straight as I can. Okay, so our last little piece to trim, and then I'll iron this down. I have to tell you, when I was a little girl, I had a baby blanket that was in pink gingham, baby pink gingham, just like this. The checkers may have been a larger print, but now every time I see this print, I'm reminded of that little blanket. I was very attached to it too. I won't tell you what age I gave that up, because that would just be embarrassing, but you know, I turned out okay. So now with Girls of My Own, I just love this pink gingham, and I have to just do it because it just brings back some nostalgic memories. Things you didn't know about me, that's what we should name this tutorial. That I was very attached to a baby blanket, way past being a baby. Okay, I am good to go. That looks really nice. The more I do applique, the more my trimming gets better and better. Okay, just taking my time to make sure I did a super job at that. Okay, now returning to the machine, I'm going to change my thread color so that we have pink going around this pretty K. Okay. Okay, so now that it's done with that sat stitch, the very last stitch, and you can follow the stitches along on the screen up here. It will tell you exactly what's next. The next stitch is just somewhat of a bean stitch that goes through the top of this satin stitch, and it's so pretty. So I love it when the file includes a design like that. It really is gorgeous. So I'm just gonna put white thread through my machine and rethread real quick, and then it's gonna do that final stitch, and then we will finish up the shirt. Okay, so this is how it turned out. Now, I have baby brain, so I can't remember if I actually ironed down my K, so I'm going to redo it. The reason why you want to do it before the satin stitch is because the satin stitch is rather thick, so you just get a better press when you're pressing on a flatter surface on those placement stitches instead. But it's no problem. If you forget, you forget, and you can just do it at the very end. But look how pretty. Okay, so you see that pretty, oops, let me go right here. Do you see the pretty white? Oh, I love that. In the, oh, the K, it's so cute. I love that. Okay, so now we can just unhoop our design, and we'll be all ready to just finish up the back. Okay, so I'm just taking my hoop out from the inside as well. And then I'm going to turn the shirt inside out so we can do some finishes on the back. And then we'll just get it all nice and ironed, hung up, and ready to wear. Okay, so here is the inside of the shirt. So now that top layer was a tearaway. So we can just take that top layer, and if that bottom layer starts to peel up, don't worry, we're gonna actually be cutting some of that off. And then you can iron down the rest of it. But you just literally, like the product says, you just tear away your extra stabilizer, and you can go through as well on the inside as well to tear this away too. I actually like to do that just because it takes some of that thick and bulkiness away from the shirt. I believe you can just keep it on there. Let me know if you just keep yours on there. I like to grab a weeding tool, being very careful, of course, not to puncture your shirt. But the more you do it, the more confident you get that you're not gonna rip your shirt or anything like that. But I just grab a weeding tool to kind of grab little ends of that up and off. And then just tear that away. But let me know if this is a step that you do or if you just skip it. I kind of like to get as much as I can off, even if you can't get all of it. I just feel like it kind of softens the look of the shirt up and doesn't make it look so stiff, if that makes sense. But personal preference, so. Okay, so I did most of it. I'm gonna leave the crayons just because that's going to just be so much work to get that out. Okay, now I'm just going to take my poly mesh and I'm just going to peel it up around the design. Now this is going to be a cutaway, so you're not gonna tear it up. But then I'm going to take my scissors, okay, and then I'm going to just cut and leave maybe a 1/2 inch. Now, on this part, you want to also be very careful that you're not cutting your shirt, because that would just be the saddest day ever if you spent all this time on your shirt and you cut it at the very end while you're cleaning up the stabilizer. So I'm just leaving about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch around that perimeter there. Okay, looks really nice. And I just usually just take the shape of the inner design. So just kind of make a crayon box. Okay, this bottom part. All right. Okay, so now I am going to just iron that back down just a little bit. Iron those edges back down, and then what you can do as a final step is you can add some tender touch. So a tender touch is really good for kids' shirts. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't had very much luck with my tender touch. It's been falling off in the wash. If you have any other brand that you use, please let me know in the description box. But I got some advice from some fellow embroidery friends the other day, and they told me that I need to press it more than iron it when putting the tender touch on. So I'm gonna try that with this shirt and see if that makes a difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and heat up my Easy Press because I feel like I will just get a very even and firm press if I use that. You of course could use an iron. You could also use a heat press, and I have mine on my back counter, but I just don't want to heat it up right now. So I'm gonna grab my Easy Press, and then I will show you how I'm gonna cut the tender touch and put this on the shirt. Okay, so I'm gonna heat up my press to 270, and we will get the tender touch ironed onto the shirt. So looks good. If you want to trim any loose threads, you can at this point too, if you have some long ones. I heard not to trim them too close, but if you have some big long ones, you can trim them down a little bit just to clean up the back and to help it not really show through the shirt. Okay, that looks really good. And cleaning up any loose threads from the back. Whew. Okay, so now I'm just gonna grab some of this tender touch that I have, and I heard also, and I've been doing this with my other ones, though it hasn't really made a difference on whether or not it stays on better or not so far for me, but I've heard also that you want to have your tender touch, so I'm just gonna lay it over here real quick and trim down to just about the size of my design. But I heard it to, the best you can, make it have rounded corners. And then that also will help. So I'm just going to take the corners and round those a bit. That will also help it to stay put a little bit better if it doesn't have little sharp lips that can grab and pull up easy. Okay, so I'm just rounding my corners, and my press has heated. Okay. Okay, that looks good. I have a little bit of a sharp edge over here, so let me just soften that. Okay. So now I'm just going to put some parchment paper over that just to be safe on my press. Actually, I probably don't need it, but be safe than sorry there. Okay, so I'm just going to press that, and it says 10 to 15 seconds. So I'm just going to put a lot of pressure on that. Make sure I get all of it. So I might need to press a couple times. Okay, so I'm going to take that parchment paper off so I can really see the edges here. And press, press, press. This probably would be so much quicker on my big easy press, or either a bigger easy press, I should have grabbed one, or my big press in the back. So use a bigger press if you can, or iron it on. I'm just making sure to get it a lot of pressure on that. Okay, so I should have grabbed a bigger press for this. I was thinking the size of my design and not really compensating for the surrounding area. So my 9x9 would have been better for this. But we will see how using more pressure worked for that. So, oh my gosh, that looks really nice. So the Tender Touch just makes that softer on the inside. It's really nice for babies and kids' clothes just so they don't have any itchy threads itching them during the day. But how sweet does that look? I love that. So cute. So then I like to just iron out any wrinkles, but I didn't really get very many wrinkles on there. So that looks really nice. It is all done. Okay, so I have quite the mess here. It's kind of behind the scenes look at how the craft room gets really messy when you're having fun. But here is the final shirt. How cute does that look? I love that. And of course you can add a name to the bottom as well if you'd like. And you would do that in Brilliance. And just make sure that you just buy a font that you'd like, or they have a few fonts in there. And how fun! I love that. Okay, so if that is all you wanted to learn was just how to do t-shirts with the Babylock Alliance with applique and machine embroidery, then you can sign off now. But if you want to, I'm going to make 4 additional shirts. I am not going to be chit-chatting through the rest of the shirts. I'm just going to put on some relaxing music for you, and you guys can just relax and watch me stitch out the last 4, and I hope you enjoy doing that. And so stick around. We're going to do 4 more. I can't wait to show you how those turn out. They're all school themed and related, but I am in love with these. How fun. Okay, I'm gonna get to work, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this tutorial. Let me know if you want to see any other types of applique in the next tutorials coming up. I definitely want to do some Halloween bags for my kids. I think that will be so cute. And then with the holidays coming up, the applique projects are going to be endless. So I hope you enjoyed this. Stick around and watch me work for a little bit, and I'll see you all in the next video.